Welcome to Inspiring Possible. I'm Christy Pennison, former stuck person turned therapist and dream consultant. Are you feeling stuck, overwhelmed, uncertain, or just need a little inspiration? Then I want to help you gain the clarity, confidence, and courage to create possibilities and live a life you love. Because folks, life's too short to be miserable. Hey, Inspiring Possible listeners. Welcome back. Well, listen, I don't know about you, but sometimes I have a role in life, and that is to lead people. And I don't know who at one point decided to make me a leader of people. I think obviously I chose it myself, but I'll never forget the first time that I was given a task of supervising somebody and like work, that adulting work stuff that we do sometimes. And I was like, who, me? Y'all want me to like make sure and hold this person accountable? I mean, y'all must have lost something along the way. And anyways, I got thrown into this leadership position. And even though I had led some maybe like small things back in high school, like they asked me to lead this group or lead that thing, I did not feel equipped. Okay. But I was put in this position. And sometimes that's what leadership is, whether it's we're leading a group of volunteers or whether we're leading some people in our careers. I just found myself in this leadership position and I had to figure it out. And there was a lot of challenges along the way. So if that sounds like you, I hope you stick around because I have a special guest today who's going to help us navigate all this leadership stuff. Because whether you believe it or not, you're leading somebody, whether you're leading yourself or people in your family or someone around you. So if you sometimes feel like challenges in life is hard to navigate overall, and then you have to help other people navigate that, then this episode is for you. So, without further ado, I want to welcome our leadership guru of the day to the Inspiring Possible podcast, Tony Marginetti. I did it right, Tony?
You did it perfectly.
Yay! Awesome. Well, Tony, okay, first I got to know what kind of got you passionate about helping people with this leadership stuff?
Yeah, it's a great question. And so, first of all, thank you for having me here. I'm so thrilled to be here and looking forward to our conversation. So, what got me excited about this stuff is, first of all, I spent 25 years working in industry and doing work in biotech and high tech. And it was a crazy journey. I worked with some great companies, some good leaders, some not so great leaders. And
We always remember the not so good leaders,
yeah,
don't we, Tony? Like you remember the really good ones, the
Mm.
ones in the middle you don't really remember that well, but then you also remember the really ones that you're like, I will never do that if I'm put in a leadership position, right?
Yeah, I often ask people that very question, like, what did you learn from the people who didn't do it well that you want to avoid doing? And I think that's a good thing to remember. But for me, it was just this journey that, like, I felt like I was always searching for something else. There was something that was unfulfilled, but I still had my head down and said, hey, I'm doing the work that is what I do. And at the time, I was working in finance and strategy roles. So I wasn't really doing leadership development and coaching and what have you. So it was a very different world, but I continued to persevere and move up the mountain, if you will, is what I actually would, what I always talk about is this idea of like continue to climb without that realization that I was climbing the wrong mountain for me.
Uh-oh.
And then, yeah, go
That's
ahead,
not
please.
good, is it, Tony? Right? I mean, I don't know. Do you hike at all in real life?
I do. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Have you ever done that before? I know I have. And I'm like, this is the wrong path. And I got to now turn around and go a long way.
No doubt. I mean, it's funny. We talked about books earlier before we got on. My first book is called Climbing the Right Mountain. And in it, I talk about these two particular mountains. The first one was when I hiked with my friends. We were young. We climbed a mountain without a map, without all the right gear.
You're just like, we're
And
going to take this path right
yeah,
here. This seems like a
exactly.
good path.
And it didn't work out so good. We didn't get to the top. Let's put it that way. Then you do it the right way and you realize what it takes. And like when you prepare yourself and you do the right things, it actually makes the climb much more rewarding and doable.
Okay, well,
Anyways,
awesome. I know I kind of got you sidetracked on telling your
it's
story
all
there.
good.
Sorry, with another story, Tony. But okay, so you're talking about You're on this path, your own path of
Yeah.
trying to figure out you were climbing the wrong mountain. What was your wrong mountain that you were climbing?
Yeah, I mean, focusing on being a CFO and, being in finance and, thinking that I was the analytical type of person. But in reality, I was working so hard to be that person and realized that there's more to me than I was letting myself believe. And people would tell me things like that all the time. They're like, yeah, you're not the typical person who does this type of stuff. And I'm like, okay, what does that mean?
But you're like, no,
Uh,
I'm supposed to be this type of person. I'm gonna do it.
Yeah, which I think is weird anyways, when you think about it. We shouldn't be putting people into boxes like that. We should be
Mhm.
allowing people to express themselves no matter what role they're in, right? But I felt like there was something being told to me that was saying, hey, you should explore other avenues that might help you to be more of you. And that's what got me to think like, hey, it's time to start leaning into that. And that's what I did. Eventually I had this moment where I decided to leave the room. I literally got up and walked out of a boardroom and decided that I'm done and I'm ready to do something different, to change the way that leaders in the room show up. And that's what I did.
I just love this because I tell you what, if I see one thread of all the guests that come over here, it's at some point there is a pain. It is
Mm,
like something that you are like, I can't stand for this. I gotta, like
yeah.
you said, leave the room. I gotta walk away. I'm now passionate about it. Sounds like you became passionate in that moment that there has to be a better way to do this leadership thing. And how can I help other people that are given sometimes positions without really given like
Yeah.
leadership 101 training. They're just like, maybe you're good at this thing, you're good at what you're doing. We should put you in charge of people. And they may be good at that thing, but they may not know how to lead. And it's because nobody's taught them or they ever haven't acquired the skills. So it sounds like you were in that place of like, no, I got to go.
I just love that you lean into that, this idea, and you've talked about this. You're like, where do I get the skills or the ability to be a leader? Why me? And I think there's something about that which is such a truth that many people realize, and myself included, where all of a sudden you find yourself in that moment of like, what? How did I get here? And then, what do I do? And I think that's what I want to be able to help other people do is realize that you don't have to go it alone and you can learn from others and you should have others in the journey to help you. And I think that's important, is to make sure that you don't feel like you have to struggle and suffer and then realize that there's other paths available to you.
I mean, I always think about let's go with the mountain analogy, right, Tony?
Yeah.
Now that you've interjected that with your first book. And who knows, you might have this in the book, but I just always think of like, there's been some times where I've done some incredible hikes.
Mhm.
And there was this one time that I was actually hiking alone. Literally, I don't know if you've ever been to Zion National Park and done the Angel's Landing hike. Have you done that one, Tony?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay, so super scary, right? When you get to a certain point, at least for me, because I'm not like an avid, like, let's go be close to a cliff. Okay. And I can remember there was a point that I was actually stopped when I did this because my family members that had came on that trip with me that time, they're like, no, you can do that hike by yourself. We're just going to pray that you safely return to us and we'll know if you survived, if you make it back later on today. So I was like, okay, great. Thank you for your vote of confidence. But I'm gonna get to a point in this, but I remember there was a point along that hike that there was this woman that was sitting down. I was like looking confused about maybe whether I should go forward or not. And she's like, yeah, my family went ahead. And I'm like, I don't know. I came up here to do this thing, but I don't know if I want to do this thing. And then we kind of convinced ourselves somehow, me and this stranger, that we would do it together.
Yeah.
And we got up there. And what was cool is that even though my family didn't come with me and I was hiking alone, I really found somebody to hike with me. And
Mm,
we talked each other up that whole thing like, don't look
it's
down.
wonderful.
How's your life? I found out so much things about her by the time we got to the top. And then once we got to the top, her family was happy. She was reunited and it felt so good, and then she took my picture and it was
That's
great.
awesome.
Okay. And so I think about this about I think sometimes we get in positions and maybe we
Mhm.
can go here in this discussion where we feel very alone in the role
Yes.
that we've been given and then we're trying to figure it out on our own
Mm.
when we could have just asked somebody to maybe walk with us on the journey. And so it sounds like this is something that you kind of help. How do you help leaders recognize that they don't have to do it by themselves?
Yeah, it's not an easy thing to get people to realize that, especially the more senior they are, they have a harder time, coming to grips and breaking the patterns that they've gotten themselves stuck in. This realization that they think they have to wear a certain mask that says that I have all the answers. I have to have all of the confidence that comes with being at the top, if you will. So it's harder when you're entering from that level. When you're coming in from a level of more junior,
From the
or
bottom.
yeah, not the
Like, I
bottom,
think
even
that
bottom,
song
but like
started from the bottom, now we're here, I'm weird, Tony, just what comes into my mind, you know that song? So
yes,
they
I
start
know.
from maybe more of an entry level leadership
Yeah,
position.
yeah, I mean, they're more open to understanding that. Yeah, I don't have all the answers, and I can see that having somebody would be helpful. And they don't have a lot of the habits that have they've gotten themselves stuck yet. And so, for them, they can see. Yeah, it'd be great to be able to have someone who can help me, and they already know
Yeah.
that there's a lot more to learn. However, when you get to the more senior levels, you have to kind of help them see, hey, like, how are the things that you're doing serving you? What are the things that are getting you in the way? And how could things be better? And so it's helping them to paint a picture for breaking through the patterns that have served them to get to this point, but how those patterns, when you break them, could actually get them even further and create a ripple effect in the organization. And so those are the things that I try to get them to do, is to envision something different. One of my favorite coaching questions is, what are you tolerating that you shouldn't? Because we tolerate a
Ooh,
lot in the
ooh, I
work we
like that.
do. Yeah, we tolerate a lot of activities and behaviors, not just in others but in ourselves, that cause us to be stuck.
We can go two different directions here because I'm
Mhm.
curious about one of the directions. What do you find are the most stuck places of these
Mhm.
people that maybe have been in leadership for a while? Like, what are the habits that you do see most commonly that are keeping maybe that leader from growing, the organization from growing, and
Mm.
expanding?
I'll answer this in two ways. So one way is through this idea that like they have to have all the answers, and that if they want to move forward, it's got to be done fast. We have to make quick decisions. So making decisions fast is equated to being the person who can move the ball forward and make progress. The reality is, it's the opposite that can be true. Slowing things down in a way that allows other people to have an opinion and to see that they're part of the process allows you to see that your power does not come from just, having the definitive answer. It's from allowing other people into have a voice basically in the room. And that allows you to move much further and make more progress, because it allows it to be better decision making, and it makes the team feel stronger together. Right. So that's one thing. And the other thing
Okay.
that often gets in the way is a sense of feeling like that when they make a mistake, they're not owning up to it. Understanding that sometimes we do make the wrong call. And how do you go back to people and tell them that, hey, here's where we're at, here's what happened, and I made a mistake, and that's just the way it is. And I want to own that, and I also want to think about the path forward. That communication coming from a place of real humbleness is what makes people want to stay along with you, because they see you as a human.
Yeah, I mean, that's really good. So the two things that I'm hearing is really and I can see this in leaders and just go-getters and this inspiring possible. So we trying to create possibilities around here, Tony. But one of the things is that sometimes when you're used to doing, and even if you've been in a leadership role for a while and you're the doer of all things, then I think that pressure to make those decisions really quickly can feel very real. And it's how I love
Right.
that. How do I slow down and then also allow people to help me problem solve this decision or help me look at different perspectives. It doesn't mean that I still won't eventually select this initial
Yeah.
idea, right? But that I'm at least allowing us to give some time, space, perspective before we just jump in with a decision. And then the second thing you said is just owning mistakes and that
Yeah.
realizing I think this is a big one. And I don't know if it's like the ownership thing, but what I see sometimes is, that kind of pressure that people put on themselves as leaders to say, like, I should have made the right decision
Mhm,
versus like, I'm human. I have human feelings. I'm going to
mhm,
get mad some days. I'm going to wake up on
mhm.
the wrong side of the bed some days. Somebody is not going to like what I said today. And I may have not should have said that thing. I don't know. But owning that stuff that's hard.
100%. Yeah. I mean, I think the key thing is, and you get better at the second part when you do better at the first part, right?
That's
When you
right.
think about it, when you're slowing down, then you're less likely to say things that are not going to be received well because your thinking is clearer. You're becoming,
Hmm.
you're slowing things down. When you're going so fast, it's hard for you to make space for clear thinking. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you'll still make mistakes, but at the very least, the ability to articulate well what it is that you want to say is going to be better when you can slow
Well, and I
down.
love how you just said allow, and you didn't say this directly, but this is what I'm hearing what you're saying. You tell me if this is I heard correctly. Is allowing time for thinking,
Yes.
and that seems to be huge to me because I think so many times people can start focusing on the doing that they don't allow the time for the thinking.
Yes. And it's easy for us to fall in that trap. I mean, I don't know about you, but I definitely see myself falling into that trap from time to
All
time.
day, every day, Tony, all day, every day. Okay.
Yeah. And the world is wired that way. I mean, it's just like a never-ending faucet of emails and meetings. And it's like I just want to shut that thing off and be able to say, okay, it's time for me to have my time. And I think we just sometimes have to do it for ourselves and say, hey, look, that's going to always keep coming. And we have to be able to say, yeah, well, this is I need to take a moment so I can recollect myself. I need to get back to the grounding of who I am. And in order for me to be able to serve others and do the things that I need to do, I need to find space because otherwise I'm going to be of no use to the people around me.
Yeah.
That's what we don't want.
Yeah. Well, I know those are the two stuck places of maybe people that are, have found themselves at the I don't know if you want to call it higher level or further up the
Mm.
mountain or on the totem pole, whatever analogy you want to use. But for those people that maybe we'll flip it around, and for those that are maybe finding themselves in leadership positions for the first time, maybe they're finding themselves responsible for
Mm.
people for the first time, and they maybe haven't gotten into some of these stuck habits that we just talked about.
Yeah.
We'll flip it on the opposite side and say, what are the things that you think they need to either
Yeah.
learn, it could be develop or perspective that would be
Mhm.
helpful for them on the journey?
Yeah, I love that you did this because I think it's such a great thing to share, and it's something I don't often get an opportunity to talk about. So we'll talk about that. I think first and foremost, get clear about what do you value. What do you truly value? And I know this. Often people say like, "Oh, I know my values," and they just kind of like spout them out. But like, you have to really spend some time thinking about how do my values show up today? How are they showing up in the work I do? How am I honoring my values? And so, as a leader, you want to be thinking if I am valuing something that is, let's say, the value of curiosity, how am I staying curious more often? How am I, creating that sense of curiosity in myself, but also about my team and about the work? And if you find yourself, from time to time checking in and saying, hey, I'm wondering how I'm doing with my values. If when you reflect on that and you say, gee, I don't know. I mean, maybe I've lost my way. That could be a leading cause for what's feeling like a misalignment with who you are. So come back to those values and don't blame yourself. Don't like beat yourself up, but instead say, "Hey, it's time for me to get back on board and commit to doing the work to ensure my values are represented in what I do."
I mean, I think that's a good one, and I don't think we always think about it because and I'm thinking about this in business, and this can be in a lot of different ways, right? But you can be a part of an organization that has maybe organizational values, but there are values that are unique to you. And
Yes.
I'm as you're talking about this, even gaining clarity myself, that I think that when you have your own internal values, if you can find a way to pull that and adhere to that in your leadership role,
Yeah.
then that's going to go a long way in helping you maintain integrity with yourself.
Yeah, and don't be afraid to share with others too. Like, one of the things that I find really helpful is when people know that, I let's say you're a person who really values, your faith as something that really drives you. Like, be okay with that and sharing that with other people. That like that's something that's a big part of who you are. This is something that I am a big proponent of. That when people get to know you at a deeper level, not just the person who shows up at work, there's something about that which creates a deeper bond. We don't have to be all best friends at work. Don't get me, there's not,
Yeah, and you don't have to necessarily share your life story. This is where I
no.
came. Here's my traumas. This is what, happened to me in life, whatever. But being
Yeah.
some level of vulnerable is what I'm hearing you say.
Yes. I like to say it's like an intentional vulnerability, not like, just kind of airing all your dirty laundry, but it's like, if you have a hobby that you think is, that you'd like to share with people, share it. That might be something that bonds you with somebody else. I've seen this play out a couple times in the work that I've done, and it's really been fun to see how that opens the door for other people to share as well. And it creates a connection that then allows other people to want to show up and do more work together because they get to know that, wow, like I now know Joe better than I ever did because I can see Joe as more than just a manager. He's also a father, and he grew up, in, I don't know, Oklahoma, and he's, this more dimensions to him than I thought I knew. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So what I'm hearing for anybody in leadership, but like just going off our question of like what would you suggest acquiring along the way to get so clarity of values, vulnerability, intentional
Mm.
vulnerability. Is there
Mhm.
any other things that you would say, hey, yes, if you're thrust into leadership and you're leading, do this too.
Yeah, and this is a great lead in reflection. We talked briefly about reflection along the way, but if you want to get better at something, you have to do some reflection. And my particular flavor of this is to do like a weekly spark is what I call it. And the weekly spark is to spend some time, reflecting back on the past week and look at the things you've done. What did you learn? What did you not do so great? What are the things that you enjoyed, not enjoy? I mean, kind of, bring a few series of questions to just ask yourself so that you don't just kind of like completely move into the next week without really, recognizing what just happened, right? And allows you to also think about how you want the next week to look like, right? You may have more control over your time than you think. People think, well, all the meetings on my calendar are coming from somebody else. Well, guess what? Maybe you can bow out of one of those
Say no.
meetings, say no. Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think one of the reasons why I point this out, and I'll stop after this, but I'll just say that like one of the signs of burnout is that when people start to look at their week ahead and they say, there's nothing about next week that excites me or just makes me want to even show up to next week. So I say, well, put one thing on your calendar that makes you excited, something to look forward to, right? Like, and if that means just, a coffee meeting with a friend or maybe it's a networking discussion with somebody at work that just, gets to get to know them a bit more, then great. Put that on there and make that something you can get excited about because it's what you need is to have something to get you moving in the right direction.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Put something exciting, folks, and it could be
Mm.
simple. Put something exciting. Yeah. And listen, Tony, I've been in a place of burnout and I call it workplace burnout, okay? And if you're not intentional, I always say it's like not putting gas in your car. And I've
Yeah.
told this story before, but I still did this just the other day. This was like the second time in the past maybe 5 years that I did this, but I went down the road and said, "I'll make it to the gas station." And I did not make it to the gas station because I didn't put gas in my car. And like, listen, Tony, I mean, I don't have like the car that tells you how many miles left, but I have a car that says, "You're low on fuel. Would you like me to find the nearest gas station for you?" Okay.
Mhm.
And I ignored that prompt from my car on several occasions
Yeah.
that led me to sitting on the side of the road, thankfully with a friend and a pizza, because I was bringing the pizza back home. But I remember they looked at me and they were like, "Yeah, we're on the side of the road, aren't we?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I told you not to push that eco button, turn that eco button off." I'm just kidding. That really wasn't the reason why we got stranded. But, I remembered how long we had to wait. We had to wait
Mm,
for somebody to come to our aid. They had to
mm,
go get the gas, they had to put it in the gas tank. And I'm
yeah.
thinking about this workplace burnout, which we took a whole different detour from what we're talking about with leadership. But I think sometimes leaders and people in general can get so burnt out, they don't
Mm,
realize it. And then it takes you a lot more time to get that gas in your car, that energized, feeling better about the work you're doing. So I love
mm,
how you just gave a practical nugget here for those people that may be struggling.
yeah.
Find something you can put on your calendar that can energize you for the next week, and something you can look forward to. And hopefully that'll be the one thing that helps you then be able to have that time to reflect and say, what can I say no to?
Yeah.
What can I focus on more that will energize me and hopefully help me recover from a place of not goodness is what I call it, not goodness.
Goodness.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I love that. I mean, this is exactly why it's like we need to be able to have some sense of control. We want control in our lives, and God knows there's so many things in our lives that is just out of our control. So, what can we put in control and allow us to feel like, oh, this is something that I can see and I can do from my own makings, if you will. So,
Yeah, yeah. Well, look, I know you're a book writer and you recently
mhm.
wrote another book, Campfire Lessons for Leaders, right? That's the newest one.
Yes, yeah,
How uncovering our past can propel us forward. And I live in the South, Tony. Okay. And so we have campfires a
yeah.
lot. And I love a good campfire, especially in the winter, not right now when it's blazing hot outside. That would not be a good idea. But when it gets a little chillier,
Mm,
there's a lot of people I know that like a good fire, and I know campfires are often a place where you can actually conversate because you have
yeah,
nothing to do but sit and look at that fire unless you're cooking something over it, okay? So
mm,
what are some takeaways? I know that we can't talk about the whole book in this
yeah,
podcast episode, but what are the high points that are lessons for leaders that leaders maybe could learn without having to go through the lesson? Does that make sense?
yeah, yeah. I mean, I think it's a great way. I mean, let me kind of give you the overarching theme of what the book is about, and then I'll kind of dig into some of the lessons. One of the things about the book that I think is really interesting is that as I started to write it, I was thinking, oh, here's these lessons that I've learned from people who have come on my podcast, The Virtual Campfire. Some amazing people who've been on a journey to, doing big things in the world, but they don't just show up, right? I wanted to share this with people so they could really learn from that and use it in their own lives. And so I created these prompts and these tools for people to use in their own lives to reflect on their journey to see
Oh,
how they
cool. So
can
this is
use
like a
that.
reflective. You can reflect
Yes.
and read and reflect. Okay.
100%. And I think at the end of the day, one of the things I realized as I wrote the book is that it's about connection. It's about connecting with ourselves, understanding ourselves more fully, by really going back and seeing what are the things that have made me who I am. And then by doing so, we connect better with others. When you know yourself well, when you reflect on yourself, then you can, go out and have conversations with other people and get to know them better. And I think that's one of the things that's at the center of the book is this concept of, knowing the journey that we've been on, and then using that as a tool to connect with others. And some of the lessons in it, and I'll just share one or two just to kind of give you a sense. One of the lessons is believing in the power of believing in others. And there's a few people who demonstrate this very powerfully, but like sometimes you have to believe in something really big and have a belief in the power of other people for them to rise to the occasion. And I've had this happen to me,
Yes.
leaders
Me
who
too,
do
Tony.
that.
Me too. Somebody
Yeah.
believed in me before I believed in myself. And I'm glad that you highlight this lesson because it is one of even the foundational things about this podcast is is I think there has to be an innate belief. It may not make sense on paper about what
Yeah.
you're going to do. It may sound crazy to somebody else, but belief in either the thing that you're pursuing or the individual. This is hard for me, I think, especially even as leaders, because sometimes we want to go straight to like the negative assumptions about
Yeah.
something or someone. And it's like, no, how can I believe that this person is showing up in their best possible way? And I may
Mhm.
just be missing something that they need to help them grow.
Yeah.
But anyways, belief, yes, belief, because you got to believe. I mean, it's better to believe and it not come to pass because you could believe and it actually come true. I mean, that's been my
Mhm.
experience. What's your experience been, Tony?
Definitely. I mean, that's one of the things that, belief is not necessarily always going to be the case where you're going to have that thing come true. But I think part of it is it gets you to step into action. And I think action is
Oh
what
yeah.
we're trying to get people to do is to say, how can you get over that fear and at least take action and be okay with whatever happens.
Yeah.
So
Well, and like you said, and I think sometimes people, like you said, in your experience, people notice things about you that you didn't maybe see in yourself.
yeah.
And it sounds like that they kept on speaking belief into you. I mean, I don't know,
Mm.
speaking these things into you, like Tony, you can do this. Sure, you can, and you're like,
Yeah.
no. Is that what had happened, Tony? He was like, no.
You're absolutely spot on. I mean, there's something about that which I actually hadn't thought about that as part of my journey, but it's true. There have been these people who were believing in me, and they still to this day. There's things that I see in the people around me who are saying like, "Hey, you're doing some amazing things in the world, and you should be keep on doing this." And I'm like, yeah, whatever. I'm very humble and
We
but
are the
there's something
worst,
about that.
though. Tony, but this is the bad thing about it. I'm gonna tell you for real. Okay. This is, I think, a struggle for a lot of people that are doing good in the world. They sometimes
Mhm.
minimize the good they're doing in the world. They're like, but it's not that big of a deal.
Yes.
So and so. And I do think that comes from a place of like you said, humility. I'm not trying to be in the spotlight, or I don't think it's that great. But then when you hear the perspective of others and somebody else's belief in what you're even doing right now that you may can't fully actualize or see, then it can be a motivator for you to keep on stepping into that
Yeah.
action and actually maybe stepping into that version or vision of you that they see. I don't know if I'm
Exactly.
just processing this out loud as we're talking about this, but I know people have told me things, and then it brings me more confidence to step into that version of me versus holding back, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's exactly, I love the way you put it because it's almost like that sense of if like a million people tell you that something is amazing and then you're like, "Ah, no, it can't be." Well, a million people can't be wrong, you know?
That's
So
right.
there's something about
So I
that
believe
sense
what
of
you're saying is true. I'm gonna pull it all the leap all the way around.
yeah, and not only that, but why deny them their belief? I mean, that's a pretty powerful thing to
Oh, that's
to
good.
lean into, and I think it's a great thing to be able to say, yeah, I want to make it true for them. I want to make it
Ooh,
true for
I
them.
really like that. I've never thought about that, but I want to make it true for them. And I think sometimes, and I know you talked about this a little bit before we push the record button, but I think it's sometimes our own self that we're having to lead, like you said,
Mhm.
and because sometimes we're the worst,
Yeah.
you know, we're worst at ourselves of like
Yes.
saying like you can believe it. And I think what's crazy, and this is cool though, is you can believe stuff for other people sometimes all day long, but sometimes you have a hard time believing it for yourself. And it is how can I rally this belief for myself and realize that I can step into it. But sometimes we need other people to believe it for us before we
Yeah.
believe.
Which is, and to take this one step further, when I think it's an important thing and it's a concept also in the book, is this idea of surrounding yourself with the right people. Because if you don't have the right people around you, the environment that sees things in you that you don't see, then, you may fall victim to, well, I'm the only one who thinks this way.
Yeah.
You want people who support you and who can really help you to rise to that potential. So it's really important to be shaped by the right people in your circle.
Tony, you're making me think about my workout earlier today. Okay. I can think about the
Nice.
the coach, and I love her. Shout out Christine. And she was like, Christy, you really do want to get that bigger kettlebell over there and you want to swing that. And I'm like, no, 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 don't want to swing it today. And I'll be honest with you, I did not rise to her level of belief. But, I think about it, you need people in your life that say, "No, what's actually possible for you and you can actually do this other thing. You're just limiting yourself
Yeah.
by maybe limiting self-beliefs, by limiting beliefs that you hold." And you're right, those people that surround you that push you a little bit further to step into that skills, talent, strengths, unique abilities can really be a game changer. So I love how
Mm.
you highlighted that lesson too. Any other lessons that you feel like, I know we can't go through them all, but something
Mm.
that you would like really want leaders to take away from this conversation of like, get all
Yeah.
the lessons we've talked about so far, but this is another lesson I'd really want you to carry with you.
Well, I think the first lesson that is really a powerful one. It's one that's it's about shaping the world that you want to see. So one of the things that I highlight is the sense of if you feel like you are missing something, like there's something that you need in the world, like the support, then sometimes you have to create it. And what I mean by that is, as one of my guests, she has a son who has a very rare disease, and he was born with it. And so she was struggling to find connection with anyone. So she just kept on going to doctors, and they would tell her that, like, hey, we don't know what he has. And like that she had no diagnosis. And so it was a real struggle for her. And she felt alone. All the parents and the other mothers, they didn't get her struggle that she was dealing with. And so she felt very alone. So she went and tried to find community, had a hard time finding community. She finally found community by creating community. She actually started a podcast called Once Upon a Gene. And through that, she brought in people who were having the same experience as her. So she created this world that actually helped to bring together people who were suffering from the same challenges, caregivers who really had a hard time connecting with other people. So just gives you an
Yeah,
example.
man, I love that lesson too. Cause
Mm.
I mean, I've experienced this in my life. Sometimes it's not there, and so it's like, okay, create it. And it can
Yeah.
be hard to be the person that says, okay, I'm going to take on the responsibility of creating it. But man, how rewarding is it when you're able to create a world that you want?
Yeah, it's like, if you don't feel like you belong, create something you belong to, and then other people will want to belong to that. If that makes
Yeah,
sense. I think
it
it's
does.
borrowing from Brene Brown a little bit.
I know. Listen, at this point, Tony, I don't know about you, but I borrow from things, people all day long. And that's why I love this podcast because I can get guests on and I'm sitting over here making my note, borrowing. And,
There
if
you
it
go.
helps me along the journey, I'm for it. And listen, folks, we do this podcast because it's really for you. But I think I've said this before. I'm really also doing it for me. I can't be the Mother Teresa all the time. Like, I'm selfish. I want to learn these things because I want to be a better leader, right? And I know there's
Yeah.
some things, even in my life, whether it's leading this organization that I have or leading on this podcast, like the reality is there's still times that I fall short, make a mistake, don't
Mhm.
do something right. And if I can learn how to better lead and lead with, it almost sounds like you said alignment, like aligned with
Mhm.
my values and being intentional in some of those things that I need to be vulnerable about, then hopefully it can also help others feel more connected and included so that we can do this
Yeah.
journey and we can get to where we're trying to go. So, well,
Yeah.
Tony, if you were to go back to younger you, any point in time in younger you
Mm.
lifespan, as you were talking about how sometimes reflecting on the past can propel us forward, and
Yeah.
you're like, hey, I want to give myself one piece of encouragement, advice,
Yeah.
truth spoken into, what is the one thing that you would tell younger you?
Yeah, there's so many things, but I would say if there's one thing that I would do is take more risks. Take more risks. I can't say the word. Because more risks are good. When you take a risk to do something different, to get out there and explore, you learn. And, as long as you're not doing anything that's going to be too dangerous, which, life threatening, if you will, then it's okay. There's nothing that's going to be in a changing your world so much that it's going to cause you to not be able to come back to where you started from. People often think that, like, if I take the detour to go try something different, that they can't come back to something else. The reality is that's not true. You can try things out. The more experiments you try to do, the better off you are. And I think I did a fair amount of that, but I think I didn't do enough. And I wish I could have told my younger self to say, hey, go and try all that
Do it.
stuff.
Do it.
Yeah, just do it. Yes.
Just do it. Yeah, that Nike campaign. Just do
Mm,
it. Well, Tony, if people are like, you know what? I like this conversation and I want to learn more lessons because y'all didn't give me enough lessons, or I might want to make sure that I'm climbing the right mountain, and they might want to get that book, Climbing the Right Mountain, or Campfire Lessons for Leaders. Where can they find the book? And then also how can where's the best place for them to connect with you at?
Yes. So the starting point would be to go to my website, which is ipurposepartners.com. And there you can find my books, my podcasts, assessments, all
All
types
the
of fun
things.
things. Yeah. And you can also find me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active there. You can just look at my name. That is a good starting point. In terms of my books, they're also available in bookstores as well as Amazon. I don't think anyone goes to bookstores like they used to, but hey, you should.
You should
Amazon's the
support
best place.
local, support
Yes.
local. Okay. Okay. Well, awesome. Well, Tony, look, I just want to give you some gratitude and acknowledgement. Thank you so much
Mhm.
for coming on the show today. But I also just want to acknowledge you for something because, as I was hearing just a little bit of your story, I know I didn't get the whole thing. You just gave me a little snippet today, but also hearing your passion, you know, you did the same thing that that woman did. You said, I walked out of that boardroom that day and said, this is not working. This is not
Mm,
working. And I want to support leaders, and I want to also help leaders to feel better than I did in that
mm,
situation. And
yeah,
so you did create it. And so I think that's pretty incredible that now you're at the point in time where you're also now helping lead other people along the journey of how they can navigate through some of the
thank you.
challenges that leaders face. So I appreciate you coming on and sharing some lessons with us.
Well, I'm so grateful
So,
for that. Thank you.
yeah, absolutely. So listen, folks, if you've been listening, y'all know I give y'all a takeaway or something to just ponder on a little bit more. Just ponder on it. Maybe go sit by a campfire, okay? And spark something
Mhm.
and make it fire up, okay? And hopefully you will just think on this. You'll probably think on a lot of things we talked about, but this is one thing I'm gonna be thinking on whenever it gets colder around here and I'm gonna be sitting by the campfire, is that guess what? If you find yourself leading, remember, you have the ability to not only believe in other people, you have the ability to believe in yourself. That's the first thing, believe in yourself, but also
Mhm.
believe in other people. And guess what? If you don't like the way the world looks, you can shape your little world and create it. So I challenge you to get out there, believe in yourself, and go create something. Until next time. That's all for today on Inspiring Possible. If you found a little inspiration today, please go on over to iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you tune in to listen to leave us a comment and rate us. Also, make sure and link up with me at inspiringpossible.com to get the free Dream It, Write It, Do It workbook. And don't forget to follow us on social media and share this with anyone who needs to be inspired. Remember, if you can believe it, it's possible.